Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of ANCAP Radio. I'm your host, the voice of liberty, Adam Carswell. And on today's show, we're going to be restreaming an interview, or really a Q&A session that Doug Casey did with SWP, Strategic Wealth Preservation. If you're not familiar with SWP, we will have all of their information down here below. And you can actually scroll through our feed to see previous episodes of their own show that they've broadcasted here on our channel. So we're really good friends with SWP. We're happy that Doug and them were able to connect for this exclusive session that Doug did with their higher level clients at their company. So from investment strategies, especially in the gold sector and beyond, get ready to dive in with SWP's Mark Yaxley and our very own Doug Casey here. If you're listening live or on the replay, make sure you hit that like button, that retweet button, and let's go ahead and get into it. Take it away.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this exclusive SWP event. I'll be your host this evening, Mark Yaxley. We have people joining us from all over the world tonight, including our distinguished speaker, Mr. Doug Casey, and our moderator this evening, Mr. Steve Hawley, both of whom I will be formally introducing shortly. This is our very first SWP Golden Turtle Social Club online event. I know that's a mouthful, which is exciting for us as we can include all SWP clients on this occasion, regardless of where you're joining us from. Previously, when we did Golden Turtle Social Club events, they had all been done in person for people living in the Cayman Islands or visiting the Cayman Islands. So we do intend to have other in-person events, but we're very excited to host this online event tonight. A reminder, if any of you do make it down to the Cayman Islands, please reach out to us so that we can give you a personal tour of our new state-of-the-art facility, which we're very proud of. SWP is pleased to introduce these online events as part of our company-wide ethos to provide free education and expert opinions to our clients through a variety of channels, including our Inside the Bald video series, our newsletter, and most recently, our podcast series. We also have a new website coming along on the horizon, which will greatly improve the SWP client online experience. Before we begin with tonight's event with Doug Casey, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. Firstly, everyone had been asked to submit their questions prior to the event, but in the case you do have some additional questions, they can be submitted during the event using the chat function. We are on a time limit tonight out of respect for Doug's time, so there aren't any guarantees, unfortunately, that we'll be able to get to everybody's questions, but we will try our very best. Your mics, as you noticed, have been muted so that everyone can focus their attention on Doug and Steve's conversation. And finally, the event will be recorded, so if you do have to leave early, you will have a chance to watch it later. So without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished guest speaker this evening. Doug Casey is a best-selling author, world-renowned speculator, and libertarian philosopher who has garnered a well-earned reputation for his elite-level and often controversial insights into politics, economics, and investment markets. Doug is widely respected as one of the preeminent authorities on rational speculation, especially in the natural resource sector. Doug literally wrote the book on profiting from periods of economic turmoil. His book, Crisis Investing, spent weeks as a #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and became the best-selling financial book of 1980, with nearly 440,000 copies sold, surpassing big names such as Milton Friedman, Richard Nixon, and Carl Sagan. Doug then broke the record with his next book, Strategic Investing, by receiving the largest advance ever paid for a financial book at the time. Interesting side note, Doug's book, The International Man, is the most sold book in the history of Rhodesia. His most recent releases, Totally Incorrect and Right on the Money, continue the tradition of challenging statism and advocating liberty and free markets. He has been a featured guest on hundreds of radio and TV shows, including David Letterman, Merv Griffin, Charlie Rose, Phil Donahue, Regis Philbin, Maury Povich, NBC News, and even CNN. He has been the topic of numerous features in periodicals such as Time Magazine, Forbes, People, and the Washington Post, and is a regular keynote speaker at the Freedom Fest, the world's largest gathering of free minds. Doug has lived in 10 countries and visited over 175. He currently spends most of his time in Argentina and Uruguay. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Doug Casey. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Mark. That was certainly a long enough introduction. I wish I could add that Steve Martin once said that I was born a poor black sharecropper's son, but that wouldn't be true. So anyway, otherwise, I guess it's pretty accurate.
Thanks, Doug. And moderating this evening's event is a dear friend of mine and a mentor of mine who is joining us from the Cayman Islands. Steve Hawley has been investing and advising on gold for 50 years, including work with several banks and private gold trading companies. He was an early advisor to Strategic Wealth Preservation and remains a trusted friend and ambassador of our business today. Steve is also an author and feature writer for publications such as Zero Hedge, Lou Rockwell, and Doug's International Man since its inception. Welcome, Steve Hawley. Thank you for agreeing to be tonight's moderator. And on that note, Steve, I will pass the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you, Doug.
Yeah, likewise, Steve. It's always good to see you.
Doug and I get together every Monday for a Zoom call, but this is the first time we've had this sort of a format. I've received about 20 questions here from people from around the world. And then at the last minute, we got a whole pile more that I couldn't even write down fast enough. So we'll be limited to this group unless we pick up some others along the way that someone else can ask. So starting with the first one, if physical gold is somehow better than derivatives such as ETFs, why does my broker advise me to stick to ETFs, which are easier to buy and sell right on his computer?
Well, your broker obviously doesn't understand why you're really buying gold. You should own gold in the physical form where it's your gold. When you buy an ETF for gold, you don't have the gold. You've got a security that says that they have the gold. So they're two different things. My suggestion would be that when you're dealing in gold or gold stocks, find a different broker, because I don't think your broker knows much, or maybe he does, but he's looking for a product where he can collect a commission, which you can't if you buy gold bullion or gold coins and store it yourself.
Okay, well, let's see. What form do you favor holding gold in and why? Bars, coins?
Well, I'm a fan of gold coins when they're in your own physical possession. Why? Because they're recognizable as gold. People won't question the fact that they're gold. They're small and fungible because at most they're going to be worth $2,500 or something on that order. So you prefer gold coins. Now, if you're storing them offshore, like with SWP, I guess bars are equally good, but two different things.
I also tend to say myself that it's good to get, if you're going to buy coins or bars, whatever it's going to be, that it be in some sort of form that people recognize. If you're in the middle of a crisis and you want to sell your gold, if you've got something very unusual, you're going to find very few buyers. And in a crisis, you want the most buyers that you can possibly get. So whatever's the commonest form, whether it's maples or eagles or whatever's most recognized. In Europe, Krugerrands seem to be the most recognized. People are most willing to buy them.
I like British sovereigns, which is the most common gold coin in the world. U.S. double eagles are fine. You know, I remember years ago, I bought a 1 kilo Johnson & Matthey gold bar from a guy who didn't know what to do with it, couldn't sell it anywhere. So, you know, I bought it for a significant discount. And I don't really like owning it because, what am I going to do with the 1 kilo gold bar? It's much better to have coins in your own possession. So stick with the coins, I'd say.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I found myself in the same position. The guy was selling a bunch of kilo bars. And I just kept saying, no, I don't really want to own that format. And he kept dropping the price until he was almost 20% below spot. And I couldn't stop myself. I've still got them. I'm still kicking around, but not very useful.
You're right. We're in the same position that way. Well, maybe you ought to hand them over to Mark, and he can make a market in them or something like that. I don't know.
Good suggestion. About half of these questions were not about gold. This one is about something that Doug and I both advise people on quite regularly and have for many years. This guy says, I want to heed your advice and establish a second residency in the Southern Hemisphere, either in Uruguay or Argentina. And I could use your advice on that.
Well, good choice of countries, Southern Hemisphere. At this moment, I certainly wouldn't pick Venezuela. Argentina and Uruguay are definitely the places to be. I mean, at one point in the past, it looked like Chile was going to be okay. But look, as you all know, in Argentina, they've elected Javier Milei as the new president. And this may be the biggest thing that's happened in world political history forever. Here's a guy who is a declared anarcho-capitalist, and he was popularly elected by a large margin. I think that only happened because Argentina was bouncing along the bottom, and especially the younger generations totally fed up with being ripped off by the socialist, fascist, the Kirchnerites, the most recent incarnation of those philosophies. Things are very, very cheap here in Argentina still, especially when we're talking about real estate. That would be an excellent choice. Uruguay, also an excellent choice, but it's much more expensive, a little bit different situation. What would you add to that, Steve?
The most important thing that I would add to it is that wherever you're planning on going, don't listen to any one pundit on this, any particular advisor, and just automatically do what he says. Get as much information from those guys as you can, but then do your own homework and select a place that you feel that you can live with. I'm 76 years old, and if you're 25 years old and you have 2 young children, you're going to want different places from the ones that I'm at. Uruguay is a place where I own a home, and I'm very happy there. It's not my only home, but not my only country. But it's not the greatest place for working. If you want to start a business, it's a terrible place. The red tape is horrendous. And also it's difficult making a living. Just getting paid is difficult. So if you're 25 years old and you need to make a living, wrong place. So don't just look at what one of us might happen to think is a great place. Use your own criteria and find the right place based on your criteria. What's going to be good for you and your family?
You know, one thing, Steve, is that a lot of people know that I live mainly in Argentina and Uruguay, and people get in touch, and sometimes I get together with them. And I've gotten together with a number of Europeans in the last couple of weeks from Italy, from Germany, that just want to get out of Europe. And they see one of these 2 countries as being the place to go because they're the most Western oriented of countries in Latin America. And they just don't want to be in Europe. And I think they're smart. Europe is on a slippery slope, and it's about to go over the edge. I really think so, for a number of reasons that we could talk about. But where's the best place to go? I used to like New Zealand. I used to live in New Zealand. But, they suffer from the tall poppy syndrome and a lot of other problems. And Australia is even worse. The nice thing about them is that they speak English, of course.
That's true. And both Argentina and Uruguay speak primarily Spanish. And the closer you are to a city, the more people you're likely to bump into who actually speak English. And the more you get out into the weeds, it becomes less common. This same guy has asked an additional question that bears answering. He says that when he moves to either Uruguay or Argentina, he eventually wants to obtain local citizenship. And you've commented on that quite a bit over the years, of the pros and cons of, there are some very good reasons for doing so, and there are a few things to be concerned about.
Yeah, Argentina at this moment is the cheapest and easiest real country in the world. I mean, you can get these Caribbean companies like countries like St. Kitts and Dominica that you can buy an economic citizenship from for, I don't know what the minimum price is right now. It's probably still Dominica. It's probably around $150,000 plus. But in Argentina, if you live here for 2 years and you only have to live here for 6 months of the year for 2 years, my understanding, you can apply for citizenship and it can be granted. And the Argentine passport is very good, and it's likely to stay good as a passport, which some of these little Caribbean countries may or may not, depending what the powers that be want to do. And Uruguay, they're to become an Uruguayan citizen. It's a little bit less written in stone, but after 3 years of residence, you can have an interview and generally become a citizen, no problem. You won't become a national, which is a distinction they make, which is unfortunate. But so 2 years Argentina, 3 years more or less Uruguay. Paraguay used to be very interesting. I have a Paraguayan permanent residence card, but on research, they've tightened it up a little bit, and they'll grant you citizenship, but you have to visit the country every 3 years in order to remain a citizen. So there's little glitches like that. Well, you'd probably want to visit the country every 3 years anyway, but I'd rather not have that proviso in my citizenship. There's other places too, like Brazil. If you adopt a Brazilian kid, there's lots of homeless Brazilian kids running around. You can become a citizen after only 1 year. What you do with the kid, I guess that's another question. But and Brazil is an excellent passport to have.
You've also mentioned over the years that there are definite advantages in not having a citizenship in another country. Typically, almost every country in the world that I know of treats you better if you're a visitor or a resident than if you're a citizen. You don't get taxed as much. You don't have the same responsibilities. They don't own you. And with Argentina in particular, they have the odd habit of saying that once you're a citizen, you can't not be a citizen. You can't turn in your passport and not be an Argentine. So there's an odd twist there. But there's a definite advantage in, unless you definitely need another passport because you want to give up your previous one, there are advantages in having residency in several countries so that you are less owned. Did you want to comment further on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, it'd be great being an Argentine citizen, but if you live in Argentina, you're going to have to pay Argentine taxes. Why would you want to do that? So become a citizen and live someplace where you're out of the tax system, or maybe live in Argentina for 5 months of the year and some other place for 5 months of the year and travel for a month or so. That way you can live tax-free. But no, I wouldn't want to jump out of the frying pan of the U.S. tax system and into the fire itself, Latin American tax system.
Okay. Can you point us to a person or agency that knows if these countries offer special visas for retirees? And if yes, how to go about it? I have a gut feeling that time is running out at this point.
Yeah, you're right about that. Time is getting short. So let me see. I don't think that either Argentina or Uruguay have any special deal for retirees. Costa Rica used to have a pensionado passport for rich retirees. I don't know if they still do. Portugal has something like that, a golden passport directed, I think, towards retirees. I don't think these countries down here in Latin America do, to my knowledge. Do you know of any, Steve?
No, I've never heard of anything like that. He does mention that, do you know of any person or agency that knows that can guide me?
Yeah, I do.
We do have friends that.
Yeah, so I don't know how we can introduce them to Mikkel, I guess.
Yes, Mikkel Thorpe, who owns Expat Money. If the person who's querying this, if you have a pencil in front of you, his email address is support@expatmoney.com with capitals on expat and money. And if you don't have a pencil on you, please email SWP and we'll get that to you.
Steve, just to jump in for a quick second, also Tanya in the chat put in Panama. I'm assuming Tanya meant to say that Panama has a program like that.
Okay.
Oh, I think that's probably right, but I'm not familiar with it really.
Okay, next one is SWP has vaults in the US, but from a US government risk perspective, that's not too helpful, is it? Is it better to use one of their US SWP's overseas vaults?
Oh, I can't answer that question, but I wouldn't want to store serious gold in the US personally.
I'll jump in on that one, guys. I think probably in the best position to answer that. So yes, we do offer vaults. We don't own and operate those vaults. Those are what we refer to as a sister vault, owned and operated by a third party that we have vetted thoroughly. But all ownership, transactions, record keeping when dealing with SWP, whether it be storing metals in Cayman or storing metals in Dallas, is run through the Cayman office. So there is that distinction. We don't have a U.S. presence. We don't have a U.S. office. We don't have any sales representatives in the U.S. We're very careful about our exposure there. But we did recognize that some of our American clients did want to keep their gold and silver closer to home. And that is the reason that we've done that. But people certainly have the option to store with us in Cayman or Singapore or New Zealand, as Doug pointed out earlier. Unfortunately, nothing yet in Argentina or Uruguay. A little bit trickier from a logistics standpoint to store gold there and make a market.
Yeah, in Uruguay, there's an outfit called Fort Box, which has a very good operation in Punta del Este. In Argentina, under the Kirchnerites, the government closed down dealing in gold coins, and they were notorious for going into people's safe deposit boxes and banks. I'm sure Milei is going to change all that, but Argentina has not been a good place to store anything in the past. I think that's changing.
Okay, how can someone protect their assets from their local government? When seeking relocation to another country, what are some significant indicators that you look for in that particular country?
Well, the usual things: rule of law, a non-predatory, low-tax government, traditions that you think you can get along with and live with. But the whole world is going in the wrong direction today, quite frankly. So we're all like a herd of wildebeest or zebra out on the veldt, and we're always being hunted by the predators in the state. So there's not a lot of good options anymore. Switzerland's not even what it used to be. It's not Switzerland anymore. Even Uruguay. They used to say Uruguay was the Switzerland of South America. Mm-hmm. I don't really think so anymore. It's better than most countries in South America, but not the old Switzerland either.
Yeah. The next question regards our friend Mark Farber. It says, I heard that Mark Farber commented that he's bullish on silver, but even more bullish on platinum. What's Doug's outlook for platinum?
Mildly bullish. I mean, the trouble with platinum is that it's an industrial metal. So it's going to move, and it's mainly used as a catalyst. I mean, it's somewhat used as jewelry, and they do mint some coins out of it. But it's an industrial metal, mainly a catalyst. So if the economy winds down, maybe platinum's not going to do that well. Quite frankly, I'd much rather own silver than I would platinum. If you want to put $1 someplace, I'd sooner be in silver than, of course, platinum. It's mostly, both platinum and palladium. You're talking about Russia and South Africa, both of which are problematical, from a number of points of view. So that's an argument for owning both of those metals.
I tend to also consider that with any industrial metal, where industry may be rising up at the moment, but in a crisis, industry tends to go down. And anything that's industrial, lithium, platinum, whatever, there's the chance that if production falls off, you'll have a loss in the value of your metal, whereas gold is the crisis metal. For 5,000 years, whenever there's been a crisis, gold has risen. And what you're looking for with gold, more than anything else in a crisis, is not so much profit, but an insurance policy, something to provide you with liquidity in a crisis when other wealth that you may have may go down the tubes or may become worthless. So gold comes back to center.
Yeah, I second that emotion. So you own gold because in a crisis, it's likely to go up. Platinum, palladium, copper, not so much.
Okay, next one. What impact will the BRICS have on gold, and what are your thoughts about a gold-backed currency?
Well, the idea of the BRICS putting out a gold-backed currency is a fantasy. I mean, look, Zimbabwe theoretically just put out a gold-backed currency, but it's not accepted because it's not actually gold-backed. Gold-backed means that you can take your banknote to the bank and get a fixed amount of gold at will. So that doesn't exist anywhere. And I certainly wouldn't trust any of these governments to do that. Eventually, what they're going to have to do is go to actual gold for money because they don't trust each other's currencies. Why should they? They certainly shouldn't trust the US dollar, which is why they want to get rid of it. No, they're going to go to gold. We're going to use gold again for settlements, certainly between these governments. And I think eventually between us peasants as well. Well, we can use it right now. I mean, I prefer to do things in gold as opposed to cash dollar bills. When anybody else wants to take the gold. People aren't used to it right now, though.
Okay, well, this is a related one. How will gold fare and be used as money with the advent of CBDCs?
CBDCs are a total and absolute disaster. They're going to capture any remaining privacy you have. Your bank accounts will be owned and controlled by your government. I would avoid them if you possibly can. Of course, the average chimpanzee out there is going to think that, oh, this is convenient. I can use my iPhone to buy and sell. And yes, of course. And the Chinese are, in effect, buying everything on their iPhones now. But it's a very bad idea from a personal freedom point of view. So stay away from them. But the world is going to them.
Okay, this may have already been answered, but what would be your first choice of a country in the Western Hemisphere to invest in outside of the US and Canada?
In the Western Hemisphere, invest in? Well, my first choice is Argentina because the prices, and what do you do down here? Well, I'll give you some example. two of the biggest Argentine publicly traded stocks, are both New York Stock Exchange listed, are IRSA and what's the other one I'm thinking of, Steve? One's industrial type office and other properties, and the other one's agricultural. They're both run by Eduardo Elstein. They both have dividend yields in the 6 or 8% area, low PE ratios. So you can invest in those. You can buy agricultural property down here very cheaply for half, I'd say half what you get for the same kind of land in Uruguay right now. You can speculate buying apartments or houses, and they're really, really cheap. They're really, really cheap. I mean, like 10%, 5%, sometimes of what you'd pay for the same thing in New York. So Argentina, but investing, I don't think that's a good word to use in the world today. I think almost everything's a speculation, a guess on the future. I mean, investing implies stability and a more or less insured return, creating more capital every year. That's pretty hard to do in today's world.
Yeah, and you have to further consider which country it's in before you even consider the investment itself. If you think that you're considering an investment in a country that's going to be confiscating its citizens or investors' property, whatever you put in can go to zero, even though the company itself might have been a perfectly good investment. So I suppose at the top of the pyramid, the question you ask is, what countries am I willing to consider before I start considering the assets in those countries?
Yeah, and of course, in the past, everybody's thought about the U.S. as being the safest and most secure place to put money. I'm not sure where is, but the U.S. probably no longer is, frankly, for all kinds of different reasons. Look, we have actual Jacobins that are in control of the government in Washington, D.C. And I think they're going to try to stay in control, no matter who gets the most popular votes in the coming election. So the prognosis in the U.S. is not good. Canada is even worse. Where do you go at this point? Well, I still like the Orient, of course.
For me, I tend to focus on the first world countries. Everything that all of the countries that got on the coattails of the U.S. after World War II are still kind of on that economic train. And when that train goes over the cliff, the first world countries are going to be going over the cliff with it. So that's the starting point of where you don't want to be. You want to be outside of anything that is going to be in a chaotic situation. And in a crisis, to me, you aim for the greatest stability that you can get. It's not as though you're trying to make a fortune in a crisis. Primarily, you're trying not to lose what you've got. And an awful lot of people are going to be losing what they've got. So if you can just remain in a stable place, then your odds are a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, Richard Russell used to say, in a depression, the winner is just the person that loses the least, because the general standard of living could actually go into collapse. And of course, I can do a riff on gloom and doom about our new dark age and all this type of thing, which is fun, especially if you've had a couple of drinks and it's late at night. But we don't have to get that gloom and doomy now.
Okay, the next question is farmland in the US or Canada considered by you to be a hard asset? And does owning a lot of it have any effect on what percentage of one's real net worth should be in gold outside the banking system and outside of the country?
Well, the thing is that the number of farmers in the US has been going down, down, down. And the farmers that are left have to have larger and larger pieces of land. And when they work it, they can't afford to buy the machinery from John Deere or whoever. they lease it, and they really can't even touch the machinery without a John Deere guy coming in and doing it. Farming is a different business than it used to be before. I'm a fan of Joel Salatin, Salatin. He's written about 25 books. You can look him up on Amazon and read a couple of his books. And if you want to do farming, I would follow Joel's advice as to how to do it. Small scale farming, lifestyle farming, but profitable lifestyle farming. But, buying large tracts of farmland, now you're getting into a political problem, even in the US. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, yes, and in North America, the food industry is really on the ragged edge. They're doing 1 week turnarounds at this point in everything. Trying to make a living, to break into that kind of an industry when it's doing so badly, when it's in so much trouble, may not be the best choice, unless you're only doing it for your own sustenance, which may be a very good thing. And you presently do live on a farm, or at least, you're in Buenos Aires right now, judging by the painting behind you. But
yeah, I am.
When you're in Uruguay, you live on a farm. And Uruguay, of course, is just covered with farms. 80% of the people there are involved in farming in one way or another. So the volume of food there is very, very high. And no matter where you are, you really do want to be in a place where you're going to be able to eat if things get messy.
Yeah. I mean, you want to get down to the basics. In Uruguay, I've got 1,000 acres and, I've got 150 cows and, my ranch manager has, I don't even need any hogs because we got a couple of miles of riverfront and there's always lots of wild feral hogs down there that she goes down and stabs them with her Bowie knife with her dogs. She's a tough girl. We got chickens and all this kind of cows, for milk and all this type of things. That's nice about being on a farm, all this type of thing.
Yes, and in particular, in a place that doesn't get terribly cold. It only gets down to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit in Uruguay in the dead of winter. So it is possible to be growing food all year round.
Yeah, that's right. Put up a greenhouse and you're really doing that if you'd like. So, good idea. Yeah. Very pleasant lifestyle. I enjoy it. I'm anxious to get back to the farm and out of the city, quite frankly.
Okay, the next one is, I know colleges are indoctrination centers, but perhaps studying to become a homeopath, osteopath, or an NAET practitioner would still need to be funded and would be an advisable pursuit of education. I think this fellow's asking about something for his daughter, who is 16.
Well, you know this, Steve, that for years I've threatened to do a book on what you should do instead of going to college for those 4 very valuable years. And if you want to, if you need a certificate on the wall, which you do for medical practice, okay. Or if you want to take a STEM course, science, technology, engineering, math, where you need lab work and perhaps the formal discipline of going to classes, okay, that's a reason to go to college. But otherwise, it's not just a misallocation of time, which it was when even I went to college, I think, but it's an actual detriment. And people that go to college today they're saddling themselves with a huge amount of debt or wasting a lot of money that they had. It's absolutely insane. So my podcast partner, Matt Smith, has a son, an 18-year-old guy, and he's doing exactly what I suggest other college-age people do, is learning things, reading books, going places, taking courses that are of value. So by the time he's 22, he's going to have a lot more knowledge and experience both practical and theoretical, than the average American in his 30s does. So forget about college unless you have to go there. That's my advice.
My inclination is if you are planning to be a doctor or an engineer or something similar to that, then yes, you actually need that education, but virtually nothing else. There's really very little that you need to go to college for.
Nothing else. That's right. I mean, look, the other day, it was just yesterday, a chap came to visit me here at I wanted to see him because he's an ex-French Foreign Legionnaire. And I'm a fan of Legionnaires, quite frankly. And he never went to college, and he's had a hell of a life. I mean, most people would trade everything they have to have the adventures this guy has had. So, and he's also very well educated and very knowledgeable. Dude himself, he had educated himself. You can't be educated by others. Oh, incidentally, listen, if you have a pencil, make a note of this. Everybody should make a note of this. Matt Smith's son, Max, has a spectacular blog, free blog, where he's telling about what he's doing and why, and it's great. It's called greatman.com. So go there, sign up. It's free, and it's really worthwhile reading once a week, usually when he writes it. Take this, he'll explain all this in a lot more detail.
Yeah, and it also seems to me that at that point, when you're in your late teens and early 20s, your mind is absolutely vibrant, soaking up information like a sponge. Do you really want to waste that on information that's not going to be of great value to you in your life? If you're going to be taking up gender studies or 17th century French poetry, I may be a bit cynical, but to me, this doesn't strike me as a very good investment for your parents or your time.
Oh, those are hobbies. If you want to read those things, I don't discourage people from reading 17th century French poetry. I would from the gender studies, which it's all bullshit. But yeah, no question. No question about that. College is a scam. It's a swindle today. It's not what it used to be 100 years ago.
Okay, the next one, I'm afraid you've answered this 1,000 times in the past. But it's one of those that keeps coming up. I've read many times that gold prices have been manipulated over the last decade. Could you please explain how it's done and how it's possible?
Well, I know this is a meme that's been popularized by, who's that group? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Look, this is nonsense from my point of view. Yes, on the futures exchange, you know, a brokerage firm or a fund can move the price of gold to pick off retail longs or retail shorts. Yeah, that's fine. That kind of manipulation is normal in all markets. What these people are talking about is that gold is being artificially suppressed. And this just impresses, it is absolutely ridiculous. Suppressed by who? To what purpose? Well, they say, we don't want to see gold go up because that would be a red flag that would get everybody excited and scared. Yeah, that's what happens when gold goes up. People wonder why and they get scared. But how do you keep the price of gold down? Okay. And who's buying the gold when you're keeping it down? Are you artificially suppressing it so the foreign central banks can take advantage of your stupidity and buy it on the cheap? I mean, it's a silly meme. So, and I'm not a gold trader, so it doesn't matter with me if Goldman Sachs knocks the price down a couple of dollars for whatever reasons they have at the moment. But that's the most anybody can do.
I tend to go on the assumption that, as I mentioned before, for the last 5,000 years or more, in any crisis, gold comes back. It regains its shine because it's because of all of the reasons why it's stable, because it's not a fiat currency and so on, all of that stuff. So it's bound to come back. It's always going to do so. And so for that reason, although I've been buying gold for 50 years now, and I don't sell any.
No,
Because I assume that in a crisis period, it's going to be my greatest asset. It's the one thing that I'm most likely to be able to rely on. There are other things that might be okay, but that one is the greatest certainty in my own mind. And I'm really not too worried. I have a widget on my computer screen, and I see it every day. But if gold were to go up for $100 or down $100, it doesn't worry me at all. It really doesn't concern me because I'm assuming that the end game is that it's going up dramatically enough to assure me that I'm going to have purchasing power. Beyond that, I'm not really terribly concerned. It's an insurance policy so that I can have purchasing power in a crisis period. So regardless of what it does in the meantime, not important to me. And even if people were manipulating it, I don't really care. Because once it starts zooming upward, they wouldn't be able to do it anyway. Even if they wanted to waste their money at it.
I totally agree. And anyway, people say, well, the US government's very powerful. It can suppress it. No. They tried to suppress it at $35 and then at $42. And you got to remember, back then, 50 years ago, there was only half the amount of gold in the world as there is today. And it was much cheaper, and the US government was much more powerful, and it failed miserably. So it's totally out of control. It's a ridiculous meme.
Hey, Steve, I'm just going to jump in here. There's a question along these lines talking about gold as an investment that came in from Linda in the chat. So I'll just ask it on her behalf, if you don't mind. It says, hi, Doug. Sure. What do you think about taking cash savings, putting it all into gold in a way to preserve wealth in anticipation of purchasing a home in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, look, Steve and I have been buying gold for all of our adult lives and never sold any. And sometimes it's a good speculative vehicle, but it's a savings vehicle, 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I think it's going to go a lot higher in that period of time. And in the next 3 to 5 years, I don't know what's going to happen to the value. Well, the dollar's going to be worth less. And maybe the bank that you're keeping your dollars in will fail or you'll be bailed in. Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea, although the time frame is a wee bit short for certainty under these circumstances.
Thank you, Doug.
Okay, this is an oddly phrased one. If gold exceeds 10,000 an ounce, will stocks become worthless? Alternate way of asking question, if the US dollar becomes worthless, then will stocks also become worthless?
The answer is no. A lot of the companies that have publicly traded stocks will undoubtedly become bankrupt because they can't handle the financial chaos and because the public standard of living goes down. They won't be buying as much stuff. A lot of companies are going to go bust. But no, the answer is no, they won't. There'll be companies that survive. I mean, even during the runaway inflation in Germany in the 20s, a lot of companies survived. It was an opportunity to buy if you were positioned to. I mean, in Argentina, and for that matter, Brazil, they've totally destroyed each of them, at least 4 currencies, maybe 5 in the case of Argentina now. And the economy still stumbles along. So the answer to the question is no. Just choose the companies that you invest in carefully.
Is gold inherently better than silver, or are they the same but of different prices?
Yeah, there's 92 naturally occurring elements, and gold and silver are different from each other. What are the differences between them other than the price, which for a lot of people, generally the same kind of people that we're talking about gold price suppression, we're saying, well, the historic ratio between gold and silver has always been 17-1. Well, yeah, always when. I mean, during Egyptian times, as best as I can determine, the price ratio between gold and silver was about 2 or 3-1. Now it's about 90-1. So which ones do you want to own? I think silver is the better speculative vehicle. Why? Because All the gold that's ever been mined in history is basically available and above ground in vaults or under mattresses someplace. That's not true of silver. Silver is used every year. How much is mined every year? Well, I don't know what the current number is. Let's say the number is roughly 100 million ounces of gold are mined every year. The total amount of gold in existence is probably, guessing, about 7 billion ounces. In silver, above ground stocks are not very much, although about 1 billion ounces of silver are mined every year. So these are just some interesting factets, not factoids, incidentally, factets that you could use to compute what you want to do. But I think you should own both.
You're American. Why don't you just store all your gold in the U.S.?
Because I'm actually not stupid. Look, your government, if you have the passport from some country, they consider you their property. So that, especially in the case of the U.S., where the government has gone on tilt, no, I don't even like to be physically in the U.S. anymore because it's getting way too risky. The time may come soon when they round up the usual suspects, and that might include me as a known enemy of the state. So I don't even want to be there personally, and I certainly don't want to have anything that they can steal. Well, they can grab my house, I guess. That's okay. That's like the tail of a skink. But no, that's that must be a joke question.
Well, I don't think so. In actual fact, you and I both have some fairly good friends who live in the U.S. who hold their gold in the U.S. and believe that because it's close to them, they're safe. Intelligent people.
If they bury it, yeah, that might work. I mean, yeah, if you bury it, I mean, I doubt if whatever government agency is going to go around with a metal detector looking for your gold, but they may interrogate you until you tell them where it is.
My advice is always, if you're storing your silver at home and you're planning on buying your groceries with it, and you live in Sacramento, at some point you're going to have to go to the grocery store and buy the groceries, and people in the parking lot with no liquidity are going to see you coming out. After you do this 2 or 3 times, they're going to want to know how you're doing that. And your ability to hide your little bits of silver at home are not going to carry you for very long.
No. Yeah, well, we have an expression down here in Latin America, plomo o plata. So if you're going to have some plata, you also want to have some plomo to guard the plata. That's lead for those who don't know. Silver being plata.
The next one is, you've held gold for over 50 years in various locations. Why the Cayman Islands and why SWP?
Well, I think you're better in a position to answer this than I am, but I've always been a fan of the Cayman Islands since I first went there in 1970. And idiotically, I didn't cadge together some money and start buying property. I didn't, and I regret it. But seems to me like a really good place to be. It's sociologically stable. That's really important. It has a vested interest in maintaining financially sane. Of all the countries in the Western Hemisphere, at least in theory, the Caymans should be as good as any other place, or better than any other place, really. I mean, what do you think?
Well, it does have the odd attraction that it's the only country in the Western Hemisphere that has no direct taxation of any kind. And people will often say to me, well, there's a property tax in my country, but it's fairly small. Yes, but in that country, when they got into trouble, they raised the property tax. All they have to do is the minister in charge raises the tax. So you don't really have any security. It's much harder to, if you've never had any direct taxation of any kind, for that government to start taxation, they're going to string you up if you try it in the middle of a crisis. So the odds are much better. There's never any guarantees in life, but in a place like Cayman, the odds are far higher because it's so much harder, no matter how crooked the politician may be, for him to pull it off. It's just going to be a hell of a lot more difficult for that to happen. So your odds are greater. When people ask me, what's the best facility that you know of? And there are several in the world. I know there are some in Singapore, in Austria. There's some great ones in the US, really good facilities. But I always say, never mind the facility, pick the jurisdiction first. Search out the best country where you think, as you just said, Doug, whether you have great stability over decades, you watch the government change from one to the other and not get crazy, not do stupid stuff. They honor their agreements. They understand that overseas investment is important to the country and to their job. They will lose their job if they drive away the overseas investors, so they can't bully them like they can bully the locals. And for any tax haven that's a dirty word now, but for any tax haven country, that's going to be the case. The larger the country, the less so that is. So you pick a smaller country where the jurisdiction is as stable as you can find it. And once you've chosen that country or several countries, then you choose the best facility within that country. So that's my approach.
And that's exactly the way I feel about it too. It's so important that the place be sociologically stable. And I think Cayman, gets absolutely top marks for that. Pleasant place to be.
Yes, well, there is the social part of it, that it's an unusually stable country. We have an odd history that racism doesn't work here because slavery failed. It's the only country in the Caribbean where slavery utterly failed. It didn't work at all. So everybody's all mixed together. We're all kind of 70% of our people are mixed race. So nobody calls anybody's name because you've got a brother that looks just like him. It's kind of silly. So we have a social stability where everybody's kind of on an equal plane. People get along. And so when you have a crisis coming up, the likelihood of anger coming out is diminished. And again, there's no guarantees, but what you've done is you've diminished the likelihood of being injured, being robbed, or having your government come after you. And that's the best that anybody can do, I think, in a crisis period.
Yeah, I wish the other countries in the Caribbean, or for that matter in the Western Hemisphere, were more like Cayman, but they're not. The place is almost unique.
Well, unfortunately, all of those countries were volcanic countries, so they're mountainous, and so they have hammocks of soil in between, so you had plantations that worked. You could have 100 people working for you without getting paid, and so that the plantation system was successful, and they're still living with the hangover of the plantation system in almost all of those countries. I think you and I first talked to each other. We first met in St. Kitts, and that's one of those countries where the people who work in the hotel, they smile to your face, but there's an awful lot of killings that go on. There's tremendous resentment between the haves and have-nots. So Cayman is the only one that's in the Western Caribbean, and it's a coral rock that rose up out of the sea 12 million years ago. It's just a flat rock, and we don't have any soil. We have about a half an inch of soil. So the whole system failed here. And because we were a failure years ago, we have the ability to be relatively successful now.
Yep.
Hey guys, so I've got another quick one for you, really quick one. Doug and Steve, will you be attending Freedom Fest this year? Will either of you be speaking?
No, I won't. No, I've kind of been there, done that, going to these giant conferences. So no, I won't.
I won't either. I tend to go to the countries where I'm treated best. If the country is welcoming, I'm happy to go. And if it's not, then I tend to stay away. I've even gone to, quite a few communist countries where I get a nice welcome. But there are only 3 countries in the world that I haven't got as good a welcome as I would have liked. And I turned away myself. One of those is China. I was right at the border, able to go in, but they asked me so many questions and expected me to sign my name in blood to all my statements. I said, no, I'm not taking that risk. The same thing happened to me in North Korea. So I stayed at the DMZ and didn't go into North Korea. But the only other country in the world, I'm sorry to say, in that category is the US, where I have been treated very questionably when I came in. It could be because I'm a Caymanian citizen, and the Cayman is on the watch list or something. I have no idea. But on 2 occasions, I was treated in a less than friendly fashion. So I just never went back. I want to be welcome where I go.
Yeah, as much as I've traveled, about the only place where they actually go through all your bags and interrogate you is the US. I guess if I wanted a problem-free experience entering the US, I should probably walk across the Rio Grande with 10,000 other people every day.
Doug, another one from the chat here. There's a lot of good questions in here, so I want to be sure we get just to a few of them. Josh, who's a longtime client. Josh, nice to have you here. Younger guy, Josh, really smart guy. And he says, Doug, what are your thoughts on cryptocurrency as an investment?
Well, I was a late adopter to Bitcoin because I could see how it fulfilled the first 4 of Aristotle's parameters for a sound currency: durable, divisible, convenient, consistent. But what's the value so that you don't get stuck holding the bag? And then I realized, wait a minute, it's the most convenient type of transfer mechanism. Gives you total portability and transferability across borders, which is an advantage over gold. So since 2017, I've been a Bitcoiner, frankly. And I think it's going higher. I do. I won't make that argument here, but other people make that argument very well, and I buy it. So you ought to own some Bitcoin, is my feeling.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Doug.
Okay. Do you have any sense of how high the gold price could go as currencies collapse in the future?
Well, we can do some arithmetic. If we want to talk about the value of gold in dollars, it's said that there's 265 million ounces of gold in the US Treasury. So how many dollars are in existence? Well, that's sometimes hard to compute. But maybe it's more interesting to figure out how many dollars are in existence outside the US if the US was going to make good on its obligations to foreigners. And the US has had a trade deficit for about the last 40 years. And it's been running typically 500 billion, and now it's up around $1 trillion. And of course, there's interest on the dollars that have been expatriated and so forth. So I don't think anybody knows how many dollars, US dollars, are outside of the US owned by foreigners. 30 trillion? Who knows? 40? I don't know. Nobody, I don't think they know either. So if we do some arithmetic, what's 265 million into 30 trillion? It's like $10 isn't it? I don't have a calculator in front of me. So yeah, it's going a lot higher. I'm not even counting the dollars in the US. And they're printing more of them all the time. By the trillions.
Here's a question that I almost never get, and I think it's a good one. How will you know when to sell gold?
Well, I always used to say that will be easy. Because, of course, I said this back in the days when Slime and Newspeak were both popular magazines. I said, well, when those magazines have a picture of a golden bear tearing apart the New York Stock Exchange on the front cover, I'll know that the top has come for gold. But well, magazines hardly exist anymore. But that's the kind of indicator you want. That's the kind of indicator you want. And we're nowhere near that. The average person doesn't even think about gold, barely knows that it exists. So no, we're a long way from that.
Okay, I only have one last question on this list, and I suppose we can turn to whatever you've picked up from others after that, Mark. And this one said, are you familiar with the book, The Great Taking by David Webb, and what are your thoughts on it? We were just talking with David a few weeks ago, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's an absolutely shocking book that you don't want to believe it, but it is very rational and very well researched. And God, he may be right. So I suggest everybody go on the internet where it's free. I don't know what you do to get it on the internet. I guess you just put The Great Taking in and Google will kick it up for you. It's short. What is it, 100, 125 pages at most?
Yeah.
And well written. So read it. And it's really scary. What it's telling you is that it's game over, man. If he's right, he may be right.
Okay, that's the last one, Mark.
Yeah, put the link in there, Doug and Steve, to The Great Taking, if anybody wants to go read that. So here are some questions. They've been flooding in. No shortage of questions tonight. Let's see who's next. Doug. Does Doug, we'll say, Doug, do you pay much attention to equity, precious metal miners?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I'm usually overweight in them. And I'm starting to wonder about my prudence in being usually overweight in them because small ones, especially, well, there's all kinds of reasons. Look, mining is a crappy 19th century choo-choo train business. Really. I mean, young people don't want to go into mining. Who wants to go out in the dirt and play around with big yellow machines anymore? Finding a metal deposit is very hard, very expensive. And then your problems have only started. You got to prove it up and develop it. And that's hundreds of millions or billions. And then if you're going to produce it, that's when your trouble really starts. You've got to permitting and dealing with these criminal NGOs and dealing with the local people who see it as an opportunity to shake you down, and the government, which sees it as a milk cow because you can't move the deposit. It's a horrible business. But on the other hand, gold mines and all kinds of mines, frankly, not just gold, but nickel and copper and diamonds, all this crap, have been very, very good to me because they're so volatile. When they move, you're talking 10 to 1, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1, and not over a lifetime or a period of a couple of years. But I wonder if that's changing because the small mining stocks of whatever metal or whatever it is, it's a retail market. Institutions can't own these crappy little stocks. So it's the retail market, and Canada is now raising its capital gains tax. I mean, that government in Canada is just criminal. They're raising it to, I think the number is 65 or 66%. So that if you make a capital gain, they're going to take 2/3 of it. And the Bidenistas are talking about raising the capital gains tax too. And the only reason you buy these things is capital gains taxes. So, I mean, it's almost like there's no place to run and hide anymore, frankly. Well, hopefully I've got one more kick at the cat with crappy little mining stocks. We'll see. So the answer is, yeah, I know a lot about them, and I own a lot of them. And Yeah, I think they're a very good speculation right now, all things considered. And there's a lot of negative things to consider, I promise you.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Here's another one. It's from a friend of ours in the Cayman Islands, Mark Matthews. Doug, how long do you give the U.S. before it implodes? Be because of civil or political discord, war, economic collapse, or something else? Is that actually a possibility, Doug, in your world?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, like nothing lasts forever. Absolutely not nation states. And the idea of America was unique and absolutely wonderful. But the United States, especially now, is very far from the idea of America. And yeah, I think it's circling the drain. I really do. You've got, like I said, you've got actual Jacobins in charge in Washington. These people are the same psychological makeup, the same philosophy as the people that took over France in the early 1790s. They're really criminal personalities. And I think they're going to reinstall themselves in November. And then things are going to get really, really nasty. Well, things will get nasty no matter who wins, because you've got the red people and the blue people that hate each other. And the US government is totally and absolutely bankrupt. And these wars that they're provoking all over the world, they could spin out of control. And, you know, the kind of nonsense that they're promoting with everything from the viruses where, you know, any passport may not do you any good unless you have another one issued by WHO or something like that. And the fact that the whole world is hysterical over climate change, which is a pure scam and mass hysteria. So, yeah, I think there's plenty of reason to be gloomy.
And here's a follow-up question for you, Doug. Thank you for that. If that happens, if the States goes down the drain, as you say, what happens with countries that use the U.S. dollar? If the dollar goes down the drain, you know, whether it be the question here, it says, example, Panama, Ecuador, a couple of others that either use the U.S. dollar, peg their currency to the dollar. Is that spell trouble for them as well?
Yeah, of course it does. Absolutely. In fact, it's going to spell big trouble for especially third worlders all over the world that have crap currencies and therefore try to get dollars to run away from their dirhams or kwachas or whatever kind of crap currencies they have. Those people are going to be totally wiped out. It's not nice to wipe out poor people that are trying to, you know, these people are criminals. They really, not the poor people. I'm talking about the people in the U.S. government. So this is bad news. Yeah, bad news for those countries. I mean, they should go to gold. This is a nice thing about what Milei is doing in Argentina. He says, they talk about dollarizing Argentina. I think that's a dumb idea. But what Milei has said is that you can use anything you want for money. You can use dollars, or you can use Bitcoin, or you can use gold, or anything. And that's the government shouldn't be in the money business. So I think he'll succeed, incidentally.
Well said. One last question, and then we're gonna just ask Steve and Doug for their closing thoughts. And this is a good one, Doug, I think, because you've done this. So the person says, what is your take on owning real estate in Central or South America? I think we've addressed that. But the follow-up to that is, what percentage of your assets, assuming I guess you're a Canadian or an American, would you suggest investing in real estate in Central or South America?
Well, everything is a speculation today. There's really not much stability anywhere. What percentage? Well, start out with owning a house or an apartment in a nice, stable country where you wouldn't mind going. That's a good start. Maybe move up to a little farm. I mean, that's where you should start. Start with that, okay? I don't know what percentage. It depends on how much money you have. You have $1 billion, you got a lot of options in a lot of different countries. But no, buy an apartment or a house I don't particularly like the idea of buying an apartment because, like in Punta del Este, there's zillions of apartments. Rich people buy to hide money, but they all have huge condo fees. And it costs you tens of thousands per year to maintain the damn things. Better to get a detached house someplace that you like. I think that's a better idea for a lot of reasons. Do that first, and then come back and ask me what you should do after you get yourself a detached house in a nice country. And I do suggest Argentina is number one on the shopping list right now.
All right. Well, we've got just a few minutes left. Steve, would love to hear your closing thoughts. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. There's a lot of people still listening. There's been a lot of questions thrown at you guys. What's on your mind as we close things out?
Oh, what's on my mind? I've had this topic on my mind for the last 25 years, I suppose. It was in 1999 when it occurred to me, we're going to be going into a massive crisis. And my only uncertainty was, I don't know when. But I have to confess that I would have thought that it would have happened at least 5 years ago. So although my predictions over the years have come largely true, I'm sorry to say, almost all of them have occurred as predicted, except for the timing. I've been woefully wrong in the timing. It's taken far longer than I expected it to, but we're in it now. A crisis has begun. It's the early stages, and the media are doing a relatively good job of keeping the waters muddied, so that the average guy out there knows something's terribly wrong, but doesn't quite know what it is. He doesn't know that he's in the early stages of a crisis. The simplest advice that I could give people would be to recognize that your life is going to change dramatically no matter who you are. Unless you have $500 million, you're going to have some problems to wrestle with. And you should get a grip on that and make a plan, because time is short. Pick the best place you can be at this time in your life, where you and your family are going to be as stable as you can make them.
Yeah, well said, Steve. Yeah. And Doug, your final thoughts before we wrap up, please.
Well, I absolutely echo everything that Steve has said. Totally. And nothing I can add to that. Just make sure that you diversify among investments, well, which don't hardly exist these days, but also diversify politically. This is something that people don't adequately understand. As dangerous as the financial markets are today, and they're dangerous, your biggest danger is political. It's your own government. So you have to diversify politically. It's your biggest risk, your biggest danger. So tomorrow morning, take action so that you're not all in one country. If you're all in one country, you're going to get what you deserve, and it's probably not going to be very good.
Well said, Doug. Thank you. And like you said, I think in your last two responses, what I'm hearing is take the first step. Buy that house in the second country. Don't just think about it. Start acting. And I've heard Steve say the same thing many, many times. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's been a fascinating conversation. We covered a lot of topics. There were some great questions from the audience. I'd like to sincerely thank Steve for his time and volunteering to be this evening's moderator. And of course, Doug, thank you. You're an industry titan, and really appreciate you taking the time late in the evening, perhaps after a couple drinks, like you said, for joining us. We do appreciate that very, very much. We've tackled some important questions, and you've provided some really invaluable advice. It's always a pleasure to be in your company, gentlemen. So thank you very much. Thank you for everybody who joined us this evening. There will be another Golden Turtle Social Club online event later this year, so please look out for your invitation near to the time. And thank you once again. I wish everybody a very good evening.
That's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next week. Peace.